Got it.
Okay, we are live on YouTube. Give me just a moment here to put it on our other platforms. You guys are very, very patient. It's good to see everyone on a Tuesday, even though we're a day different because of Tisha B'Av tomorrow.
Mute. He's going to mute everybody.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm going to mute everyone. There we go. And we are live. Busy day. We had 2 Briston today, so we're just catching up here. Okay, I'm just letting some people in. Okay. Going live on Facebook. 3, 2, and 1, and then we'll share it, and we'll be rolling. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I know some of you are surprised because if you don't live in Bozeman, you didn't know that class was going to be on Tuesday instead of Wednesday because of Tisha B'Av. So I'm going to give you a moment there to join. I'm just going to share this on our other platforms, and we will get rolling. Meanwhile, you'll hear my beautiful voice singing a niggun. Okay. Okay, we are live. It is Parashat Va'et Chanan. It's the second portion in the book of Deuteronomy, in the book of Dvarim. I have to share, just because you're my friends, and I want to share the excitement. Today was an amazing thing to have one baby boy have a bris here at the shul, and I had the schus, I had the great honor, the merit of holding the baby for that bris, being the sandak to hold the baby for the bris. And then right after that, I got to hold the head of a 12-year-old boy who underwent a bris, a 12-year-old boy here in Bozeman. This is not the Soviet Union after the fall of communism. It's a Jewish boy in Bozeman whose parents, for whatever reason, never gave him a bris. And today, with our moil in town, it's a special moil we flew in that does not only babies, he does adults and teenagers and children. It's a much longer procedure, but it's still done at home, not in a hospital. And an incredible thing to be able to hold a boy's head, a brave, or as we call, rock star boy who made the choice. No one forced him that he wanted to have a bris and then get the moil to the airport and fly him out. But it was an incredible day of brachot. I was told by the moil that if you're a sandak, if you hold a baby by a bris, you have a great powers to give blessing, and the sun hasn't set yet in Montana. And I got 2 today. I got 2 sandakaot. I got to be a sandak twice. So I bless each of you that joined us for Torah study tonight, that Hashem should fulfill all your heart's desires that are permitted by the Code of Jewish Law. Yimale Hashem, kol mishal zibchol, toiva v'levracha, for revealed good, with regards to our children, regards to our financial well-being, and regards to our health. It should all be in an abundance. All those that need blessings for shidduchim, for find the proper spouses, should find spouses. All those that need blessings for shalom bayit, if they're married already, they found a spouse to get along with their spouse, they should find blessings for that. If you're out of a job or you don't like your job, you should find a good job with a lot of financial wealth so you can give a lot of tzedakah. And if you're having struggles with infertility, you should be blessed with fertility. Whatever it is, and of course, if you have issues with health, Hashem should bless you with incredible health. I don't give super blessings. I'm just a regular guy. But on the day that you get the sandak, you get the, so I have powers, they told me. So I'm using the powers invested in me by God Almighty as to be a sandak to share with you these blessings. And now we're going to get into some deep Torah thought. So as I mentioned, this Parshat V'Etchanan. It's also the week in which we have Tisha B'Av. Tomorrow night, Wednesday evening, and until Thursday night, we have the 25 hours of Tisha B'Av that we mourn the destruction of our temples in Jerusalem. And I think it's safe to say that no matter what side of the political arena you find yourself in regards to the Israeli politics or American politics for that matter, the reality of the divisiveness of politics is very, very disheartening. It's very disappointing. It's heartbreaking, actually. And so we're not only discussing the past destruction of Jerusalem, but the possibility of the Jewish people being fragmented to the point that it could bring about more destruction, not of a temple, but destruction. And so we need to know how to heal that. So the first thing you need to know is you shouldn't be part of the problem. If you don't like the divisiveness, then you have to do your part to not be part of it, to be more healing, to be more blessed, to find blessing. I saw some beautiful things come out of Israel this week. First of all, I saw a video of I think it's the train station in Yerushalayim, and there's people going up the escalator and down the escalator, and it's a big, tall escalator like they have in certain airports. And the people going down were people coming from the left-wing demonstrations, the people going up from the right-wing demonstrations, and they were singing and cheering for each other going up down the escalators. They were shaking each other's hands. Right? Not everyone, but there was people giving each other Shalom Aleichem across the escalator, right? There's so much beauty that you can find even in the struggle. And by the way, it is a struggle. I'm not denying it. But you can find beauty in that. And I just think that we have to do our part to bring that. And one way to do that, as usual, is to look into the Torah. A Jew that wants to know how to live their life needs to look into the Torah. So we're going to do that tonight. And I'm actually going to go a little bit backwards. I'm going to go to the Haftorah, and then we're going to see how that connects to the Torah portion. So, because Tisha B'Av is tomorrow night and Thursday, so that means Shabbat that follows, the Shabbat after Tisha B'Av, is called Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat of comfort, the Shabbos of comfort. Why? So let's get some basics down. The three Shabbatot, the three Shabbos that come before Tisha B'Av, so this past week and the 2 weeks prior, are called Gimel de Puranusa. We read 2 weeks from the book of Jeremiah, 1 week from the book of Isaiah, so the Jewish prophets of Yirmiyahu and Yeshayahu, that talk about the impending destruction and what the Jewish people need to do in order to merit not to be destroyed, not to be exiled, and the temple shouldn't be destroyed. Of course, we didn't listen to the prophets of Yirmiyahu, the prophecies of Jeremiah and Isaiah and others, and we ended up with the destruction. So the first 3 weeks before Tisha B'Av, it's pretty negative. You know, if you Jews don't behave, this is what's going to happen. And God is predicting through the prophets what will happen to us. But the 7 Shabbatot that come after Tisha B'Av, so there's 7 Shabbatot that go from Tisha B'Av until Rosh Hashanah, right? Believe it or not, Rosh Hashanah is 7 weeks away from this weekend. So the 7 Shabbatot that come after Rosh Hashanah or after Tisha B'Av are called Shiva de Nechemta. The 7 Shabbatot, the 7 Shabboses of comfort. And each week we read a different prophet that tells us how God will comfort the Jewish people after the destruction. So if you have the Chumash that we use here in the shul in front of you, it's on page 1396, this Chumash, the live Chumash, 1396. So begins the prophet Isaiah, Yeshaya. What does he say? The first words, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, Yomar Elokechem. God will say to the prophets, comfort, O comfort my people. Dabru alev Yerushalayim v'kiru eleha. Speak in a way that will enter the heart of Jerusalem and announce to her, Ki malat tzva'ah, that her period of exile has been fulfilled, Ki nirtza avona, and her sins have been forgiven, Ki lakha miyad Hashem, for she has already been punished for all her sins, Kiflayim b'chol chatotea, twice by God with 2 exiles. So the prophet now is coming in and inspiring the Jewish people that Hashem is going to comfort them and bring about good days. And then it ends, the last words of this week's Haftorah, Se'u marom enechem, lift up your eyes to the heavens, uru'u mi bara ela, and see who created these stars. Hamotzi b'mispar tzva'am, he brings out their hosts by number. Lekulam b'shem yikra, because of his great might and tremendous strength. Merov onim v'amitz koach, ish lo ne'edar, he made them exist permanently. So it's a beautiful haftorah of comfort. But here's the best thing. The week after that, so week number 2 after Tisha B'Av, we continue from Isaiah, and guess what the words are? It begins with these words. Vatomer Tzion azavani Hashem v'Hashem shchachani. Zion will want to say, God has abandoned me, my God has forgotten me. But it's impossible. This cannot be the case. For could a woman forget her baby or not have compassion on the child of her womb? Even if it is conceivable she would forget her children, nevertheless, I will not forget. So here, the prophet continues. God says in the first haftorah that he's going to comfort us through the prophets. What do the Jewish people respond? God has given up on us. So what happens the week after, the 3rd week? God says, Aniyah so'ara lo nuchama. Oh, Jerusalem, you afflicted, storm-tossed one who has not been comforted. Right? So God recognizes that they were not comforted. And so in week number 4, what does it say? Begins with these words, also from Isaiah. Anochi, Anochi, hu menachemchem. It is I, yes, I who comforts you. Who do you, who have so many merits, fear mortal man? Why do you, who have so many merits, fear mortal man, human beings who are put into the world like grass? Right? So now it went, first God sends the prophet to comfort us. Week number 2, the Jewish people say we're not comforted. Week number 3, God says, oh boy, my beaten Jews are not comforted. What am I going to do? So in week number 4, God says, I will comfort you. And then it continues 5, 6, and 7, where God continues to comfort the Jewish people. That's the haftorah starting this Shabbat, Shabbat Nachamu, where God looks at the Jewish people and says, yes, I'm the one that punished you. I'm the one that gave you the consequences for your negative behavior, for the way you treated other human beings, for the way you treated your fellow Jews, for the way you treated idolatry in your relationship with God. You created divisiveness. You created reasonless hatred. You hated people for no reason. You hated people with so much animosity. But eventually God says, I will comfort you. The Abu Draham, which was a Spanish sage in the 14th century in Seville, Spain. The Abu Draham, I think his name was Moshe Abu Draham. He has an incredible commentary on Jewish prayer books, and he says as follows. We begin the haftorah after Tisha B'Av with Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, with the comfort, because God is telling the prophet to go comfort the Jews. What do the Jews respond? They say, God has abandoned us. In other words, I am not comforted by your prophets, God. Don't send me no prophets. A little bit of chutzpah. So God says, oh my gosh, they're not comforted. So the prophets tell God, hey, the Jews aren't listening. They're not comforted. So God comes back and says, you know what? Let's move the prophets out of the way. Anochi, Anochi, hu menachemchem. I will come. Right, like the famous words, Ki ish asher imo tenachamenu. Like a person whose mother comforts them, so too says God, I will comfort you. To me, as someone that lost my mother, it was always a very powerful verse. There's no greater comfort that a person can experience than the comfort that a mother gives you. And God says, I will comfort you, not like a father. I'll comfort you like a mother. So now here's the question. This question was raised by the Rebbe in a Farbrengen in Parshat Eikev, so the second week after Tisha B'Av in 1977. Why did God originally try to give the Jews comfort with the prophets? And only after they complained that God abandoned them, did he come and himself give them comfort? Why couldn't God, when he realized it's time to comfort the Jews, why couldn't he come directly and comfort them? Why did he even try with the prophet in the first place? Wouldn't it make more sense for God to just come and comfort the Jews himself without an intermediary, without the prophets? So to answer this question, this very basic question, the Rebbe says we have to get to the depth of what is the actual difference between a comfort from a prophet and a comfort from God. When it comes from a prophet, says the Rebbe, it means that there was something called punishment, consequences, suffering, and then there's another thing that's called comfort. And there's the negative idea called consequences, and it's negative, but because God sends the prophet to bring us comfort, it sort of covers up or takes care of us despite the negativity, right? That's when God uses a prophet to comfort us. But when God comforts us himself, it's a different type of comfort, and it's a deeper comfort. What do I mean by that? What does the Rebbe mean by that? There's two ways to look at a consequence or at a punishment. You can either look at a punishment as a very negative thing. And then, okay, I have to give you the punishment, but I'll comfort you later. But there's a different way to look at a consequence and say it's not really a consequence. It's not bad. It's actually an incredible goodness that God that a parent or God is giving me, because it allows me to become a better human being. And if I'm able to look beneath the surface, if I'm able to look behind the curtain, I will see that was never a punishment in the first place. Never a punishment in the first place. But God is the only one that can give us that ability. Now, most of us on a good day are not in a position to see a negative consequence in our lives, personally or collectively in the community, and say, oh, let me look beneath the surface and see if this is really a hidden good. Because when we see negative, we see negative. We're very, very superficial people. We live in a very natural world, and therefore we need some work in order to be able to see the hiddenness that exists behind it. And that takes meditation. That takes concentration to recognize, like it says, Ein Ra Yored Milmaila, as it says in Tanya and in other places, there's no negativity that comes from above. Therefore, any pain and any suffering and any challenge and any incredible sorrows that a person will experience, it takes meditation to recognize that it's truly good. So in the beginning of the process, when God is just starting to comfort the Jews, right after the destruction, right after the exile, they're not capable of seeing it as good. They're barely in a state of survival. So what do? They look at the comfort as like, okay, God is showing up. He did a lot of bad, but he's going to give us some good as well. We call it matnat chinam. He's giving us a gift, right? He's doing a kindness with us even though we don't deserve it. We're in such a spiritual dysfunctionality that we're not capable of seeing the godliness beneath the challenge. We're not capable of seeing the incredible gift that God is giving us via these painful experiences. So we can't accept God's comfort, because if God's going to comfort us directly, he's going to try to help us see the good beneath the punishment, but we're not capable of seeing it at that moment. We're in such bad shape. You know that initial moment, I'm going to use a very, very basic example that I always use. But imagine you're on the way to Mexico on a vacation, and you land in Denver. That's your first mistake. You used United, and you land in Denver, and they tell you your flight to Cabo is canceled. It's not going to another 2 days. At that initial moment, right? At that initial moment, you're not capable of trying to see the good beneath it. You're miserable right now. You're fuming. You accept that God has a plan, but you want me to see that this is somehow good? What do you mean? I'm missing 36 hours. The first 36 hours of my vacation, your hands are flying up in the air, screaming at some poor United agent who has no idea how to fix your problem. You're fuming at the world. But if I come to you 10 hours later when you calm down, and I say, what if I told you that because you were delayed the extra 30 hours in Denver, your sister, who you haven't seen in 12 years for whatever reason, is also going to be stopping in Denver on a stopover, and you're going to get to spend 10 hours with your beloved sister you haven't seen in 12 years because God orchestrated that you should both be in the Denver airport at the same time. Now you could say, whoa, maybe God does have a great point with what he did. I mean, maybe Cabo is nice for an extra 2 days, but that does not compare to the eternal importance of me spending time with my loved one. Now, in the first 5 minutes that you were fuming at the world, you weren't capable of seeing the good that exists beneath this challenge. All you saw was black. All you saw was darkness. All you saw was challenge. So in that point, God says, I'm not going to try to comfort you with the real comfort, which is allowing you to see the godliness beneath the surface, because you aren't capable. So you know what I'm going to do instead? I'm going to send the prophet Yeshaya, the prophet Isaiah. He's going to come and he's going to give a double dose of comfort to the Jewish people, but it's a comfort that comes from the prophet, not from God directly. But the Jewish people, as they hear the prophet talking, and as time passes a little bit, and they realize that God really does love them, and that God is really operating, and that's why he sent the prophet to us, we start seeing the world in a much holier way. We start seeing that reward and punishment may not be as superficial as it may seem on the outside. Maybe there's a deeper reason why we're going through this suffering, or this painful experience, or this challenge. And now we say to God, you know what, God, I want to hear more. Tell me more. It's 10 hours into this delay. I want to hear more. Why am I stuck here? How did I get here? How did the Jewish people end up in exile? Why am I still in Persia? Why am I still in Babylonia? Why am I still in the Roman exile? Why am I in Media? Why did Nebuchadnezzar and Hadrian and all these Jew haters from various eras come and destroy us? God, you need to tell me more. I don't want the prophet. I want you. And God says, ooh, Aniya Sayer Aloinu Chama. The shaken up boat, the shaken up Jewish people, they weren't comforted by my prophet. That's the step one where God says, oh boy, I better kick in here and give them the real dose. They're finally ready. They've done the work. I can now show up and show them how I never do bad. I know exactly what I'm doing at every given moment, and every experience that human beings experience is exactly the way God intended it. So when you think you're, right, Chavi always talks about when she teaches her Tanya, but that pain is something that happens to us. Suffering is a choice. Pain is reality, right? You have an ingrown toenail, you have a displaced ACL, a torn ACL, you have a stroke, it's a pain. Whether you suffer because of that pain and whether you choose to suffer, that's a choice. And in the beginning, we're not capable of starting to see things from a deeper level. But as time progresses and Hashem says, okay, you guys are doing the work, you're meditating, you're spending some time thinking that maybe I'm not out to get you. Maybe there's a deeper meaning for why I gave you this quote unquote, seemingly insurmountable challenge. Now I will allow you in. And then God says, I am showing up myself, says Almighty God, to bring you direct comfort. And what that means is I'm going to give you an opportunity to see beneath the surface, to know why it is the way it is. It's indisputable. It's a fact that if we take the time to look closely, we will see that God had a plan. I was telling the Moyle today on the way to the airport the story of how we ended up having a mortgage-free Chabad house, a gift that every Chabad rabbi in the world dreams of. How did we manage that in Bozeman? We managed it because God had a plan for us that we just didn't know. So when we bought that land in 2011, hoping to build a Chabad house, when I schlepped across the country, including to Los Angeles, and showing up at Margot and Chagai at your house with my big sign, and we took photo ops, right? We were trying to raise money to build a shul, and every time I raised money, the price of construction went further up, and I felt helpless and hopeless, and what does God want from me? Blah, 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 all my moaning and groaning about how terrible God. And then when the right moment, when lightning struck, and it was COVID, and we sold that piece of land for an incredible profit and bought a Chabad house, God knew all along that was going to happen, that the real estate market was going to be the best gift to the Chabad house, that we'll be able to have it. I didn't know, and I wasn't capable. If you would have come to me in 2013 and say, Rabbi, maybe God has a different plan, maybe the property is not, I would smack you. What do you mean? I'm trying here, busting my chops to try to build a Chabad house, and you're telling me about God's plan, that it's something different than my plan? It turns out God had a totally different plan. And I stuck around long enough. Thank God I was blessed to live another 10 years and watch how God's plan worked out exactly, because he's the ultimate comforter. In the beginning, he throws you a prophet here, a prophet there, take a little comfort here, take a dose here. I'll try to get you off my back with some comfort. But if you want to dig deeper and you want to get real comfort, you got to meditate, concentrate, and focus on what's really going on. And you'll start seeing that there's so much of God involved here that you'll start saying to myself, oh my God, why is God sending me prophets? I want God himself to talk to me. I like this information. And that moment, God says, you know what? I am here to comfort you. And it's actually expressed in the 3 Torah portions that we read in the 3 Shabbos after Tisha B'Av. The first one's called Ve'et Chanan, that we read this week, right? And what's the first? Rashi tells us Ve'et Chanan, Moses is pleading with God to let him into the land of Israel. Or he's telling the Jewish people that he pleaded with God 515 tefillot, 515 prayers to ask God to let him into the land of Israel, and God still said no. By the way, in case you're wondering if God only says no to you, Moses asked 515 different prayers to go into Israel, and God told him no too. I hope that's a comfort to some of you. But on a side note, Rashi says that what he was saying to God is the word ve'et chanan, matnat chinam. That he was saying to God, I know I don't deserve it. You've done so much for me already. I want you to give it to me as a gift, meaning just give it to me unwarranted, unearned. Give me this gift of letting me into Israel. And that's really connected to the parsha with Nachamu Ami. God sends the prophet to comfort us because we're not in a place to really get to the depth of the comfort. So what do we get? We get matnat chinam. We say to God, just give us a little, throw us a bone. Throw us a bone. Tell us something good after you brought us so much destruction. But then we go from Ve'et Chanan, next Shabbos, to Parshat Ekev. What is Ekev? Ekev means heel, the heel of a person. And it refers to all the mitzvot that we do, even the ones that we tend to trample on with our heels, right? So it means we're elevating ourselves to a spiritual state in which we're not only following the 613 commandments perfectly, but we're even following all the details and the nuances, even the things that many people would not really pay attention to. We are, which means we're in a higher spiritual plane where we start realizing that, oh boy, why did God send me the prophets? I want my own comfort. So what happens in week number 3? We arrive at Re'eh, the portion of Re'eh which starts with the words Re'eh Anochi Noisim L'fnei. Look, take a look. Today I'm giving you a choice, good and bad, right? It's Anochi, just like the Haftorah, Anochi, Anochi. God says, I'm here, right here before you. Let's have a conversation. Let me tell you how I run this world, and that everything that happens is a reason beneath the surface. But you have to be willing to concentrate. You have to be willing to focus. And you have to be willing to get off your high horse that you think you know everything about how it's supposed to be run. Right? I always joke that when I was in Israel in Yeshiva, every conversation with a taxi driver, the monit would start off, if I was the prime minister, I'm like, there's a reason you're not the prime minister, Habibi. You're driving a taxi in Tveria. There's a reason for that. We all, in some way, we behave the same way. Oh, God could do much better. Well, excuse me. Do you know that by saying God could do much better? You know what that says about? The Moyle told the 12-year-old boy today, right after the bris, he said, listen, in life, you're going to have issues. There's always challenges in life. If you ever have a challenge, you can always turn to God and say, God, you remember me? I'm the 12-year-old boy from Bozeman that had a bris at 12 years old. You owe me one. And I heard the Moyle telling it to the kid. I'm like, yeah, exactly. But sometimes adults who don't have the sacrifice of that 12-year-old boy, they walk around saying, God owes me this and God owes me that. And if I was God, I would do this. No, you wouldn't. Allow yourself the humility. Remove your arrogance. Remove your narcissism. And allow, right? We always laugh at the politicians that are narcissistic. We don't realize that the reason we don't like them is they remind us of ourselves a little too much. Remove the narcissism and the arrogance and get a little humble. No one has to know about it, by the way. It could be, in the quiet of your own home, without even talking about it, just internally. Say to God, surrender a little bit to God and say, God, I know you have a plan. Do you mind giving me some insight into its depth? Because if you give me some insight into its depth, it will really help me in my relationship with you. And you know what will happen if you give enough days of humility, of bittul, of self-transcendence, where it's not about you all day, it's about your relationship with God, but not about you. And God eventually shows up in our lives and goes, Babala, Anoichi, Anoichi, hu menachemchem. I'm going to be your comforter personally. Anoichi, the Anoichi of Hashem, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, God's essence. He'll show up in his essence and say, Babala, here you thought I was out to get you. You're so wrong. I was here the whole time giving you the best of the best, the creme de la creme. But you have to be willing. You have to be willing to have the subtlety, the nuance, and the humility to accept what God's about to tell you, so that the challenges that seem so challenging will end up actually being the greatest gift that we ever experienced. The Medrash says, and I'll conclude with that, the Medrash says that on the day that the temple was destroyed, Noilad Moshiach Shel Yisrael, that the Redeemer of the Jewish people, Moshiach, was born on the day that the temple was destroyed. What does that mean? It means that God doesn't bring negativity without there being a deeper reason of positivity and goodness that will come as a result. So when we experience challenge, when we experience life's difficulties, and there are difficulties, individually and collectively. By the way, I don't want you to walk away from this class saying the rabbi thinks the world doesn't have tzaras. Every one of us has our challenges, every family, every person, every community, and the Jewish people as a whole, and the world as a whole, there's challenges. I'm not saying there's no challenges. Either does God say there's no. God says there's plenty of challenges. That's why he has to comfort us, because there's challenges, there's destruction. But the ultimate comfort is not when God says, I'm going to give you a Band-Aid for the boo-boo. It's when he proves to you that the boo-boo was never a negative in the first place. It was the greatest gift that ever happened to you. And it turns out it's actually a boo-boo that beautifies you instead of being a sign of injury and hurt. It's a sign of beauty. It takes a level of concentration and meditation to reach that. But when we do, not only are we closer to the coming of Mashiach, but we're also closer to finding our own inner joy and our own inner redemption, because we stop walking around all day, fulfilling all the genetic Jewish disorders of walking around kvetching all day and blaming the world for all our issues. Instead, we spend our day realizing, hey, God, you're flowing through me. Okay, I lost my job. Right? What happens when someone loses their job? They're fuming. The world's coming to an end. How am I going to feed my family? Instead of saying, okay, I lost my job. I bet God has some incredible plan for me here. I'm still going to do what I have to do to send out resumes. But I know that God wouldn't do that unless there was something better coming down the pike or something greater coming as a result. Or that it actually, in the moment of the firing, there's already a nechama, there's already a comfort. I'm your comforter in chief. Don't settle for less. As it says on every bottle, at least it used to, I haven't checked recently, no deposit, no return. If you're not going to do the work, the concentration, the meditation, the demand of God, you're not going to see the beneath the surface. But if you do, the return is infinite. It's an unlimited return of godliness, because it allows you to see all of life from such a wholesome, healthy perspective that suddenly redemption doesn't seem so foreign and exile becomes really, really uncomfortable. And that slowly transitions us from a place of exile to a place of redemption until we merit the ultimate redemption with the coming of Mashiach. When Elijah the prophet, who was in Bozeman twice today for 2 brisson, will just stay here. Maybe he'll go on top of the M or go to Pete's Hill and he'll announce, Koil Mevasser Mevasser Oimer, Koil Mevasser Mevasser Oimer. He's going to come and he's going to proclaim that Mashiach has arrived. Hine's above, baby. So let that happen. He still has time before sunset. We still got an hour and a half. Mashiach comes, and we spend Tisha B'Av in Yerushalayim, in a unified Yerushalayim. Chagai, it's going to be unified. I know right now you don't think it could ever be peace in Israel. There's going to be peace. There's going to be wholesomeness, and that's going to be with Mashiach Tzidkenu, speedily nowadays. Amen. Have an easy, meaningful Tisha B'Av. It starts tomorrow evening. Check your calendar for your local times of when it starts. We will have Eichel, Lamentations, the book of Lamentations, composed and authored by Jeremiah the prophet, will be read here tomorrow night, 9 p.m. at the Shul, and 8 p.m. on Thursday. We'll have a Mincha Minyan for Tisha B'Av. All are welcome. We look forward to seeing you. And even better, we won't have it at all. We'll party together in the holy city of Yerushalayim. Me and Chagai are going to dance together. In Od Yeshvu Skenim Uskenot B'Chovot Yerushalayim. Can't wait. We'll see you back here soon. Sei gesund. And have an easy fast. Okay.